Of us in this room are customers. We purchase goods and services every day, sometimes multiple times a day. But we're not just customers. Without knowing it, we are all part of this hyper-focused customer group that some marketer has identified, and I'm pretty sure I have mine figured out. Millennial mom who likes to wear yoga pants with baseball hats. Texan, loves fresh brewed coffee with Italian sweet cream, and listens to the musical Hamilton on repeat group. It's a really good group. But why am I talking about customers and our hyper-focused customer group?
Well, for your business, for any business to be successful, it's important to know who your customers are. Jeff Bezos, CEO of Amazon, he said it best. Your customer is the most important person in the room. Researchers Hamner, Cooper, and Choi, they wanted to dig more into this identifying your primary customer, and they found that when organizations invest in direct marketing, really focusing on that hyper-focused customer group and speaking to them, the results can be magical. Companies can create effective communication plans that actually get results and aren't annoying. They can look at their services and products and see gaps and offer things that will better appeal to that primary customer. And all this behind the scenes work, well, it leads to retention of your customer, expansion to new customers, in the end, just generating more business. This is all marketing. This is just a simple marketing approach, and it is not industry specific. It can and it should be leveraged in K through 12 education. For education entities to have a future in-school business, it is vital that they identify who that hyper-focused customer group is. And I think I have it figured out. For K through 12 education, their primary customer is this tall, unemployed, and unable to vote. It's the student, right? And you're probably thinking, okay, well, what about PTA moms or school board members or local government? Yes, they could all be a hyper-focused customer group, and they could be the primary focus, but not now. Not with Generation Alpha knocking at your door. My name is Lizzy Samples, and I work for one of the fastest growing tech companies in the world, Algolia, and I support their sales and marketing team. Prior to that, I worked in education as the director of community education, and I'm also a mom. So I have two Gen Alphas at home, 8 and 11, both boys. Archer is my oldest, and Theo is my youngest. So I will give you an example of a Generation Alpha experience in case you've never had one. Around a year ago, I had this brilliant idea to start a new rule in our house, which is to limit screen times to 1 hour on the weekends. And I had noticed that both my sons, they'd get home on Friday, they'd drop their backpacks, and they'd immediately get on devices. And they would be on there for 5 to 6 to 7, 8 hours, 10 hours a day, just switching from device to device. And I saw their weekend behavior as stagnant. And, they weren't playing board games or drawing or going outside and just exploring nature. And this made me sad because when I was a kid, that's what I did. So I was coming from a really good place when I made this overarching rule of the 1 hour screen time on the weekends. Well, the reaction I got was pure mutiny. I want to say that the 1 hour screen time rule on the weekend lasted 20 minutes. My oldest son, after the 20 minutes, came to me with this well-versed proclamation of his intrinsic rights and a list of all the benefits that screens have for children, while my youngest son was talking to our smart speaker and asking if there was a place in Austin where you could exchange moms. So Needless to say, my 1-hour screen time rule on the weekends was a bust, but I know where I went wrong. Not only was I comparing my kids' childhood to mine, which doesn't make sense because we were born in 2 different time periods, but Generation Alpha, they thrive in collaborative environments. And they want to be a part of the decision making. They want to be in the room where it happens. And my approach was much more authoritarian, one-sided. So before we get into more about Generation Alpha and what makes them them, let's break down a generation. Research team led by TEDxJesterCirED, they explained generation is not only about a time period in which people are born, but it's also about a time that it shapes them, and it shapes their cultural and political influences. So every generation is unique and has its own personality. And it's really important for marketers, businesses, and moms to understand that. So Generation Alpha, according to Ashley Fell and Mark McCrindle, both co-authors of Generation Alpha, they are born between 2010 and 2024. So the oldest is 12 years old, and the youngest will be born in a year from now. They are the first generation entirely born in the 21st century. They will never know a world without an iPad. They love gamification of everything. They are tech savvy. They actually want the world to be a better place. Their learning style is completely personalized and vastly different from one another. Market research firm YPulse, they actually did a study, and they found that Generation Alpha, even though they cannot buy things because they don't have jobs, they influence 40% of their parents' purchasing decisions. That's a substantial amount of buying power. That's more than I have over my husband. So let's put this in perspective. We're all teachers here, right? And we have a Gen Alpha student that comes into our class and they're just not digging it. They're not having a good time. They're not a bad student. They're not misbehaving. They just don't like it. They go home, they tell their parents. Well, their parents listen now more than ever, and they take their business somewhere else. And here's the thing. Traditional schooling is no longer the only viable option. IBIS World put out a number the other day that education service industry is valued at $2.2 trillion. There are plenty of companies wanting to take their piece of the pie. So, in an effort not to get squished out by competitors, how does K through 12 education stand out to this hyper-focused customer group, right? And when there's thousands of options, the answer's right in front of us. We need to become customer-centric. Peter Fader, author of Customer Centricity, he said that when organizations adopt a customer-centric business approach, they put their most valuable customer in the front of all their core business decisions. That's pretty cool. So in 2018, when I was community education director, I wanted to put this business model into action. I wanted to see if it would work. And so I did this in Hutto, and Hutto is one of the fastest growing school districts in Central Texas. The superintendent, Dr. Estrada Thomas, she had seen the power of community education in a previous district she worked for, and she wanted to bring it to Hutto because not only did it have the power to connect people, it also generated revenue for the school district outside of taxpayer dollars. So with that revenue, we were able to fund innovative programs for teachers and students. So I wanted to be a part of that. That sounded like a lot of fun. But I knew what I needed to do. I needed to actually identify who my most valuable customer was, my primary customer. I needed to figure out what classes they would actually enroll in. I needed to hire teachers that would offer them a good experience, so much so that they'd want to come back again, really optimizing that lifetime value of the customer. So while putting this plan together, I wanted to do more research and see where customer-centric business models have been successful. And I found Disney. So according to Loeffler and Church, authors of The Experience, Walt Disney theme parks are known around the world for their level of experience and service, and it's because they've remained customer-centric. They've always been focused on making sure we're creating happiness in guests. And still to this day, they are the #1 place to go for theme parks. And I read on their website that they get an average of 58 million people a year visiting the park. So they're obviously doing something right. Well, ever since the very beginning, Walt Disney has always been concerned with the perspective and where the customer and the client was coming from, where their guests were. And so much so that Walt Disney, in construction phase for Disneyland, he would go in with the team while it was still under construction, and he would look at it through the perspective of the child. He would actually get down on his knees and look up at an attraction or a building just to make sure that it was being built with the child in mind. And after the park was built, it wasn't uncommon to see Walt Disney himself just walking around, just observing and getting feedback. And with that information, he would go back to his magic team and he would make those improvements. Bruce Lovell, he's a really awesome guy. He was actually the founder of Guestology, and he worked for the Disney Magic team. This is the study of guests, okay? This is a scientific approach to measuring the magic at Disney World. And it's all based around surveys and focus groups. And so they would take that information, and Disney would continue to evolve in iterations, and he'd just get better and better. So taking a page out of Walt Disney's book, I knew what I had to do. So I did my own version of Guestology. I sent out surveys, I did focus groups, and I found out really quickly that my primary customer was not all of Hutto. What Hutto wanted was classes for kinder through 5th. That's where I was going to see the most generating of revenue. Well, then when I looked into what classes kinder through 5th wanted, I had no idea that they wanted sign language, life skills, Lego building, and slam poetry. I've never even taken slam poetry. I would never have known that if I had not focused on them. So I know what you're probably thinking. You want us as educators to create experiences and customer service and really focus on the student and telling us what to do when we have all this other things in education world going on right now. You know, we have a global teacher shortage. And you're right. Education is under more stress than ever before, and teachers are burnt out. But what if there was a way to help? What if this was the way to help? We can help our teachers. Walt Disney has this character that I love. Her name is Cinderella, and she said it best. Just because it's what's been done doesn't mean it's what should be done. It's time to innovate. It's time to think outside the box. So if I had my fairy godmother wand and I was waving it around and said, I could make an education experience that would give the students what they need and want, and teachers wouldn't feel burnt out, what would happen? Madala Institute just recently did a survey and a study, and it linked employee retention to customer experience. And they said that employees that dealt with happy customers on a regular basis were satisfied with their jobs, so much so they did not want to leave the profession. Another study showed it was for student engagement. So when those students are into that classwork and they are there, it positively predicts academic achievement. So I'm not saying that we build Disney theme parks in our schools and that our teachers walk around in costumes. But I am curious to know if anyone's having fun. And are we building for Generation Alpha or even future generations to come and building these education environments that are based on their needs and wants? Are we getting down to the level of the student and hearing them when they say, I am a collaborative learner? I am a decision maker. I am bored. I don't want to be here. I learn more on TikTok than I do in this class. Are we hearing them and making those changes? Because if you are, then you are the future of school business. And you will have a future in school business. And you will be able to hold on to your most valuable customer, which is the student, and provide them with the education that they deserve. Thank you.